Hey everyone, it's Tripl-L, and now let's talk some Death March, episode 3. Alright, hey guys, thanks for tuning in, thanks for watching the video. We're going to talk about Death March. So, this episode of Death March is pretty nicely split into two parts, the above ground part and the bottom or underground part. I should have said underground part, that's a much better word. Anyway, yeah, it's split into two parts, and there's, as I'm going through the episode, there's two distinct feelings that I have for it. The first part has a feeling that I'm going to express here, and then the second part has what I think is the real value of Death March, because you start to see it towards the end of that second part. And that's definitely the part that I guess is the foundation of Death March. So we'll talk about that towards the end of the video. We're going to talk about the first bit first. So we're 3 episodes in. People like to do the 3-episode rule, you know, like you check the first 3 episodes of a series and then you decide whether or not you want to continue watching it from there. People do it all the time. For Death March, however, if you are on this series still, if there are still like new viewers watching this along with me on these videos, and you're on the fence still, like you're still wondering whether or not you want to really invest time into Death March, I would say give it 5 episodes, because we're pretty much gonna finish up, I think, the first volume at about episode 5 or 6. And if we do that, you pretty much have the basic skeleton of the Death March story pattern for all the other volumes. It's pretty much, you know, there's the slice of life element at the front half of the volume, unless political intrigue gets involved, although at that point you could also argue it's slice of life elements. And then you have the battle portion, or the combat portions of the volumes, which are usually the last half, unless political intrigue gets involved and then it screws things up. Point is, we're going into the dungeon now. The dungeon is where we're going to see a lot of the combat logic of Death March pop up, and because of that, if you want an informed opinion, I do recommend just go for the 5th episode, and then after that just opt out if you want to. That said, the first half of the episode, like going by the 3-episode rule, that first half of the episode does kind of make me want to say Death March is, this adaptation of Death March, or this season of Death March, is not very friendly to casual viewers, right? It's not very friendly because it's actually kind of funny in a way. The first 2 episodes kind of gave you training wheels. It told you how skill acquisition kind of worked. It very quickly glossed on titles, because we saw the title acquired scene. It very quickly it glossed on skill acquisition. It glossed on the titles. There was something else it glossed on at the very beginning. Oh man, I'm forgetting. Anyway, point is, it gave us these little elements, right? And then this episode went crazy with it. And for instance, with the title thing, this episode we got a whole a bigger picture on titles. And then with the skill acquisition, Satu was just going through and he was collecting a lot of skills as he was doing things in like that middle part of the episode when he was dealing with the guild, the sewer rats. Like that required, you know, well, it called back to the little training wheel moments that we had in the first 2 episodes, and now it's just full force. The episode expects that you understand how skill acquisition works based on what we saw in the earlier episodes, and then it's just like full steam ahead. That first half of the episode though was just hard mode for casual viewers. There was so many things dropped in that first half of the episode. Let's go through a list of what's coming in my memory. We went through everyday magic, we touched on chanting, we touched on the hero summoning system, we touched on the demon lord and the demons, we touched on the saga empire, we touched on 3 different factions of religions, and we got a kind of idea of what's going on with the 3 religions, or at least 2 religions versus 1. We also got the dragon god just title dropped right there. We got the title Godslayer just dropped right there. Man, there was a lot of oh yeah, and of course dungeons. We got the dungeon system dropped right there. We got like the magic how the magic school system also dropped there. There's a lot of terms to try and keep up with, and this is just one of those issues that is innate, I think, to novels in general, is that it's much easier to present or to name drop to this degree in a novel, just because in the novel you have the luxury of just rereading the lines very easily. Like, to do it in a video, you have to like go back a couple of frames, and yeah, it's a simple thing, but for like, it's just one of those mild annoyances, whereas in a novel you can just read the line that you just read over and over until you understand what it's saying, or you can memorize the names. These little mild annoyances is like ultimately what makes an anime series easy to digest or not. And with this episode of Death March, that first half was just hard mode with all the things that were being dropped one after another. Like, we have also like various systems developed, like, because they were also talking about the nobility system and how that works with Xena's nobility, and also the Miko. I'm gonna say the Miko. I don't remember what they said for subs, but I heard Miko in there. It's funny to some degree, and I think I might be a little bit more biased at this point now, because this season I'm trying to watch a lot of anime because I want to try and cover a lot of anime on the channel. And because of that, you know, it's easy to see which series are easier to get into than others, right? Like for this season, Grand Crest Senki is like one that's a little bit harder just because it needs to sell you more on the setting. It's a full fantasy setting with its own jargon. It takes a little bit more versus series like, let's say, Kokoku, which is that thriller series, that time-stopping series, which is pretty much just a giant game of hide and seek. Like, you could very easily sell people on that. It's very easy to understand that on a fundamental level. Other episodes, what else do we have this season? We also have like Violet Evergarden, which is more of an emotional series, so people can get into the Human Element series usually pretty well. It's just like Death March requires people who are willing to like watch it and understand what Death March is going through, and just like that first episode just reminds me of that. Now, this is just as a viewer, I want more seasons of Death March. Therefore, I need this Death March anime to succeed. And for this Death March anime to succeed, I need this anime to cause people to buy enough of the original novels. Like, that is the measure for success, I think, a lot for the light novel series. They need to sell the original source material. And I think Kadokawa, I don't know how to pronounce that name, I think they're the ones that have the license for the Death March publication. Kadokawa is like a giant in the industry anyway, so I'm hoping that this Death March series is going to be enough to sway people into buying the original material. And we also have Silverlink. Silverlink is like really experienced with doing light novel adaptation, so if anything, I do think they could pull it off. But it's just like this episode for sure. If I was to give this to one of my non-anime watching friends, like, this is just not something I could recommend on the same level that I could recommend One Punch Man. It's just, this requires a bit more attention and care than the most casual viewers would want to, like, you know, invest into it. That said, on that note, I was actually watching this episode with my friend Kara, and she doesn't know anything about the series, and I realized, like, what I really enjoy about Death March are the later chapters, like, really and truly, because every time we're getting a name drop, like when we get a name drop of the different churches, you know, I'm explaining the thing to her. When we get the name drop of the hero summoning system or the hero reincarnation system, I'm explaining the things to her. When we got the purple-haired girl, you know, I'm explaining what that means in the future. When we see these little kids that Satu picks up, I'm explaining what that means to her in the future. And it's just, I appreciate how much elements this first arc, first volume, pretty much planted for us. That said, I do find it funny because Death March was the kind of series that just wanted to play around with the other isekai. So like, there's a lot of things that you go to another world series do, and Death March, what it ended up doing was capturing a lot of those elements and just throwing it into its own mythos, which was in some ways very what's the word? It's very ambitious, but it's also like, it kind of plays it like a deconstruction, but you know, Death March, I don't think did deconstruction really well. It just ended up having too much fun with the world setting it created. So, you know, this episode is pretty pleasant for me to watch, and thankfully with my friend, she got very invested, just because of the potential that I was talking about later, because like, let's face it, the later stages of Death March are where you start getting those returns. So, yeah, you know, this first half, it's dropping a lot of jargon, but it's like the rest of the episodes, like the first episode and the second episode, it's worthwhile jargon. It's jargon that's supposed to be coming back in the future. And thankfully, when it does come back, the character will explain it, because that is the nature of light novels. Light novels usually do a pretty good job at explaining concepts that came up before but weren't properly touched on. So, you know, in the one hand, it might be overwhelming, but on the other hand, it's just, you can drop it for now and just have that confidence that it's going to come back later and just be amazed or just appreciate the foreshadowing that happened in the first place. Moving on, we're already like 10 minutes in the video, but I guess like that's the first half. Apologies for that, guys. Moving into the second half, and this is the part that I really liked, and it's with the girls, and like this is a lot simpler, because once we get into the action of it, things become simpler. Like once we're dealing with fighting and dealing with dungeon navigation. One thing I want to say is that I love that picture of the dungeon, that map. Oh my god, that's a dungeon dweller's like dream right there. Holy, that would be a fun game to go through. Just that giant dungeon. Oh man, that would be great. Anyway, not the point. What I really liked in that second part is that, you know, we get the 3 girls that we see in the opening. We have them added to the kids' party. They're there, they're cool, they're not slaves anymore, they're working with him. He gives them names, and to quote my friend when she was watching this, the names that he gave her were the equivalent of calling your Dalmatian Spot. So I thought that was funny. Anyway, you know, we got Liz, we get Tama, we get Pochi. Cool. So the biggest thing that I really enjoyed, I want you guys to like also, if you're just not a reader, is the moment that they go to dismantle the beast. Liz tells us that there's... Wait, that's not the name. It's Liza. There we go. Sorry, my mistake. Liza goes and tells us that there's cores in the monsters, and she like goes through the process of dismantling the monster. And what Satu says to her is pretty important. He says, "Could you please teach the little kids how to do that as well?" Now this is pretty simple. It's easy to understand this if you come from the gamer mentality. Gamer micromanaging all your units. You want to min-max your unit's potential. So what and also like there's the human element there too, but what he's doing is effectively he's making the other two be competent, right? He's training the other 2 girls to know what the other experienced person is able to do, right? This kind of care is nice to see, because this is ultimately what Death March is going to be touching upon, right? It's going to be the improvement of these, or not just the girls, but like pretty much Satu's whole party. It's their self-improvement. Like they need to be at a certain spot so that they can fend for themselves in this relatively cruel world. Like it's a world where these kids were subject to discrimination from demi-humans, the demi-human discrimination, the demon lord stigma, and all that kind of stuff. They got stuck in this world. They've suffered. They need to make sure that they will not, or Satu needs to make sure to some degree that they will be better off later on. Mind you, that feeling isn't really being expressed in this episode, but the seed is there when he goes and tries to teach the little girls how to do something that the other one can. It's a nice feeling. And just seeing how they're working together on this, how they're going through the little dungeon, we didn't get to see much of it, but it was still nice to see. The only other note I really have to talk about is the call to action for this one. That being just the little demon that popped up and just how ridiculous it was. Like this demon pretty much just telegraphed to us what it was doing, its whole plans. It's just, you know, those characters use the advantage of pride. The pride is their biggest sin. Ooh, excuse me. Pride is their biggest sin, and they go through with it, and they just tell us what they're doing. They're just giant hams about it, and it just reminds me that this is the first novel. Sometimes the call to actions are going to be really fast. They're going to be just the most simple, most efficient call to action you could possibly ever have. Later on, once Death March develops its mythos, things become a bit more streamlined or a bit more natural with how Satu gets involved in danger. But for this time, it's like he literally just got thrown into a dungeon. That's how he got called into danger. A dungeon just swallowed him up. And it's funny, but it's also like, I do think that's a weakness that is only there because it's the first arc, because it's the first volume, because it's the first couple of chapters, because it's the first couple of episodes. It's just one of those things that you have to make peace with, because that's just how the thing works. Death March gets better though. That said, I still find it funny just because it's like on other anime, you know, that'd be a critical point where I just kind of lambast it, but there's a context here. Like there usually is context to a lot of these things. Anyway, let me just rush through the episode real quick to make sure I didn't miss anything, but I think I think I got everything that I wanted to talk about. I mean, there's other little nice moments like Satu getting something for the innkeeper as a token of thanks. Just again, Satu getting the skill of kidnapping. That was a big highlight. I love saying what that skill is going to be used for in the future. Yeah, no, it's I think it's pretty solid. I think I covered everything I wanted to. Let's see. Yeah, also, like last week, there was someone that came to my Discord server because they didn't have a YouTube account. First off, I want to say I'm very flattered that you felt the need to go all the way there. And also, last week, they pointed out that I didn't mention that Lulu was riding in the carriage with Arisa. And I'm sorry. I did think about it when I was making the video, but like she wasn't prominent, so I didn't talk about her. But again, thank you for coming to the Discord and mentioning that. I found that was a really nice surprise. I hope this episode video was better for you, visitor. I don't know what your username was, but hey, thanks. Anyway, guys, yeah, let's end it there. Thanks for watching a 16-minute video. Holy man. Okay, let's end it there. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.